Hi folks, I'm Christo. Today we are going to go through the ASRS-5, the 2017 updated screening questions for adults with or suspected ADHD. I am an ADHDer. I have it severely. I was diagnosed last year. And it's a really interesting thing to come this far in my journey and to reevaluate these questions and see why so many people have difficulty with them as well. So I want to offer some of my advice from my own experiences on how to view the questions, answer the questions, and just some little tips along the way. The new ASRS-5 statistically captures about 90% of adults with ADHD. The old test, which was the one, or the old screener, which was the one that I was shown time and time again, the ASRS V1.1, only captures just under 70% of people. And I'm really shocked to discover during the course of filming this that most practices, here in the UK at least, most GPs, still use this outdated screener. So here are my top tips for answering these questions. Number one, take time to reflect on each question. Open up the questions to your life. Make them more relevant to you and your experiences. Tip number two, I think this is the most important one. Answer the questions as if you weren't putting any strategies in place to cope. If you were to answer these questions from that perspective with those strategies in place, you will score very, very low. Of course you will. If you weren't using any of those strategies, if you were removing them all, and you weren't masking, you weren't doing any of those things, how would you have acted in those situations? So I'm going to answer all of these questions and go through with you my logic, my reasoning to the responses to them, and also why I might, if I was to think of them just from a coping strategy point of view of actual experience, they would be totally different answers. So let's dive in. Number one, how often do you have difficulty concentrating on what people are saying to you, even when they are speaking to you directly? So my strategies, I've discovered, my avoidances, means that I don't put myself in those social situations. The times when I engage with people, all of my friends are weirdos, neurodivergent, free thinkers, challenging and engaging people. So I would, based on 6 months of experience, say never really, or rarely. But if I was to now put myself into a social situation based on experience from years and years and years, before I started to really avoid everything like that, how would I respond? If I was in situations with people having normal chit chat about boring things that I didn't find interesting, that there was a lot going on around me, like a dinner party or a party or something, and someone was trying to tell me something, my brain is thinking about everything else around, as well as trying to focus on that person, then yes, I find that very often. So I will answer very often. But you can see already that skew because of my coping strategies and the fact that I don't put myself in that position anymore. It would be never. So this is what I'm saying about that. Tip number two, you really need to be answering and thinking about those questions as if you weren't using those strategies. How often do you leave your seat in meetings or other situations in which you are expected to remain seated? So I don't go to meetings. I don't put myself in positions really where I'm expected to remain seated. And I also think this question is not at all indicative of ADHD. It is for some people, of course, but for reading into this question, it's also, I think, about it is about the hyperactive side, but that can manifest differently. So if I need to sit down for a long period of time, say in a doctor's waiting room or waiting for someone, looking back at everything, I always have something with me to engage me. I've either got one of my hyperfocus interests to read about, I've got my phone, I've got something to do with my hands. So that's my coping strategy there, which I never realized. So if I was to answer it as if I had my strategies in place, it would be never. But actually, I am always needing to have something to do with my hands, with my brain to keep me engaged. So I would then have to answer very often. And I hope that's starting to make things really clear about these different question levels here, about you really have to think about the questions and expand it, because they're either too black and white, too binary, or too vague. How often do you have difficulty unwinding and relaxing when you have time to yourself? This is from a neurotypical point of view, isn't it? This question, it really is. I have got no comparison to what this question is asking, because that's my reality. How can I know how something is meant to be if I've never experienced it? So my head, my reality, to me, unwinding and relaxing is doing something that interests me, engages me, not just sitting there being all chilled. Can't do that, of course, but that wouldn't relax or engage me, because then I'd be worrying and my brain would be ticking and I'd be doing something. So it just crashes over itself again and again and again. This question is very, very difficult to answer. So I did some Googling, and I Googled, what do people do to relax and unwind? And some of the things were go to a spa, or read a book, or sit down, chill out and watch some telly. Okay, going to a spa. I don't like people touching my feet or my hands or anything like that. I don't like the chit chat. It would make me feel very uncomfortable. So that wouldn't make me feel relaxed or unwound. Watching telly. I can watch telly, but I need to have my iPad with me or to be doing something else whilst I'm doing it. So again, I can't just sit there. And what was the other one? Watching telly, reading a book. I am an avid reader, but only when a book, and it's very specific and I have no idea what it is, when a book really engages me, then I can read the whole thing in one sitting. It's an all or nothing thing with ADHD. But to pick up any book and to read it, if it doesn't hold my interest within not even a couple of pages, it's gone. So now, looking at that question with all of those thoughts in mind, we try and answer it again. How often do you have difficulty unwinding and relaxing based on neurotypical ideas? I would say very often. When you're in a conversation, how often do you find yourself finishing the sentences of the people you are talking to before they can finish themselves? Now, my strategies are in place. And then it goes back to question one, I think. But when I am talking to someone, I notice, and I've noticed now, because of everything that I've been through and a lot of self-appraisal, that as soon as someone says something to which I then need to say something in return, I don't. I hold that, and it's almost a physical kind of retention of this thing that I need to get out of my brain, but I'm not going to say it because then that will come across rude. So now all I'm concentrating on is the need to hold on to that thing. Therefore, I'm now no longer really concentrating or paying attention to that person. But for the most part, with the people that I hang out with and the friends that I have, we all just go blah, 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 blah. And you track a conversation and it will just go bong, 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 bong. But we're all okay with that. So we don't see that as a problem. But in normal circumstances, looking back, I can see that that happened a lot for me. And I would just hold on to it, therefore not thinking about what anyone else was saying. So not being able to really follow the conversation anymore until I then have that come out. So if I didn't have those strategies in place after, as a kid, probably being told that butting in is rude and it's seen as something that's bad, if I was just to be in a normal situation, yes, I would be blurting things out all the time and saying what I needed to say. But I don't do that because I've learnt that that's rude. So I'm going to answer without the strategies in place, as if I'm talking to a normal neurotypical person. Then it's very often. How often do you put things off until the last minute? All the time. There's no getting away from that. That's not anything social. That's nothing like that. That's just to do with my brain and the way that I perceive time. Even going to the doctors to start the process of an ASD diagnosis, I had that in my mind all day. It was 3 p.m. It was going to be that I needed to be there. And I knew it, and I'd been thinking about it all day. So it took up all of my brain space, and that was me waiting the whole day. And yet I was still 2 or 3 minutes late, out of breath, because I had to get my bike, because I'd left it to the last minute, because my brain does not comprehend ever the amount of time it takes to get out of the house, to go and do something. Okay, and the final question: how often do you depend on others to keep your life in order and attend to details? This is a really weird, skewed question. And of course, it's going to apply to some people straight away. But let's break that down. I've never asked for help, really. I've always tried to be self-sufficient. And I found I've always been quite independent and reclusive a lot of the time as well. So that would be never if I was to answer it as if it was the question without any sort of delving into it. But actually, what this question is asking is, how difficult do you find keeping your life in order, keeping those things, that daily things in order, for which I would say incredibly difficult. And that is where these sorts of screeners really fall short, because we're talking binary answers, binary questions, without any shades of how people experience ADHD and how those symptoms manifest. So I would answer this question with very often, and we get a score of 24. So the scoring range in this test, in this assessment, in this screener, anything under 14 and below, and you've probably not got ADHD. Anything above 14, and that's from 14 to 24, you have a higher likelihood, probability of having it. So if I'd have answered those questions with all of those coping strategies that have put in place over the past 35 years of my life, I would score as someone who isn't neurodivergent, who doesn't have ADHD. But by removing those strategies and thinking of those situations without those strategies in place, that is how you need to be answering these questions to give you a very honest answer to the questions that you've probably got. I hope this has been really useful, and any questions, let me know in the comments below, because I would love to make videos answering people's real questions in ADHD, ASD, and everything that I've experienced so far. And I will see you again next time. But also, apparently, because it's the done thing and it's needed in order to make something of these videos, you have to hit the like and subscribe button. It's vacuous, it means very little, but apparently it will make things better. That's all for now, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, folks. Bye.